Good morning, mathematicians. This is Miss Lehman. Today we are going to begin a discussion about multiplying decimals, which is one of those essential skills and an operation with decimals. Now, when we talk about multiplying decimals, guys, for us to really understand what is happening and for us to draw a model of what is happening, I want you to keep in your mind a certain key word. And I like to say that this is one of the very shortest keywords. It's only 2 letters long, but it points us in the direction of the longest operation, which is multiplication, of course. The keyword that I am thinking about and talking about is of. Of is so important for us to model multiplying decimals. Now, when we think about decimals, let's go back to what is like a base 10 block. So this is a base 10 grid that I have drawn. Of course, it is a 10 by 10 array. And when we think about decimals, guys, I want you to consider this piece of a base 10 block to be standing for one whole. So this is one whole as we think about decimals. If I were to color in an entire column, that would stand for 1/10. So if I were to color in the entire piece, that would be like one whole. So the entire grid would equal one whole. One of the 10th pieces, like this, so one of those 10th pieces, that would be like 1/10. Because look, that would be one of the 10 columns that we see in the grid. If I were instead to color in just one of these little bitty squares, we can call that a baby. If I were to color in one of those little bitty squares, that would be like 1/100, because that would be one of the 100th little bitty squares that make up this entire block. Okay? Now, let's do an example together where we ask ourselves that of question, the keyword of that points us in the direction of multiplying decimals. Okay, let's say that I want to know what 1/2 of 1/8 is. Again, think about that keyword of standing in the place of that multiplication sentence. 1/2 or 5/10 of 8/10. That's what we're asking ourselves here in this question. Well, let's talk about how we could model this to see what is happening as we multiply decimals. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to think about this first factor. This first factor is 5/10 or 1/2, and I am going to highlight 5 of the 10 columns that I see here vertically. So I'm going to take my 5/10 and I'm going to vertically draw 5/10. Here's 2/10. Here's 3/10. Here's 4/10. And here's 5/10. So vertically, the up and down columns, I have highlighted 5 of the 10 columns. Okay, we see this. Now I'm going to come and horizontally, I am going to highlight 8/10 or 8 of the 10 columns that I see laying on their side. So there's a total of 8 rows that go this way, and I'm going to highlight 8 of those rows. All right, so let's try that out. I have 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so now we can clearly see that with our vertical columns, we have 5 columns that are highlighted, all of those columns. With our horizontal columns, the columns that lay on their side, we have 8 rows, right, that lay on their side. Now, in order to figure out what 5/10 of 8/10 is, what I have to ask myself is, where do these colors overlap? Or where do the vertical rows and the horizontal rows, where do they overlap? Well, I can see that all of this area that I am outlining in blue has overlap. This is where my columns and my rows together overlap. Well, when it comes to multiplying decimals, this is where the answer lies. So the answer lies in the overlap. That's where we're going to figure out what 5/10 of 8/10 is. I have to come and actually count these, or of course, since it's an array, I can count, and I see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hundredths here. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. 5 by 8 means that I have 40 single squares inside this overlap area. Since they are single squares that I am counting, I know that it's 40 hundredths because those single squares represent the hundredths place. Okay, so I have 40 hundredths. That is where my answer lies. This is the way that we model what it looks like to multiply a decimal. To multiply a decimal, we have to keep in mind that very important keyword of, because that helps us to visualize what is happening. This was 5/10, but we wanted to know not what all of this area is. We wanted to know what just 8/10 of 5/10 was. That was this particular section of the 5/10. That's where my answer lies. The product is this overlap area. And of course, as we saw, that represented 40 hundredths.